At 2 years old, she was declared illegitimate, and her household was told to stop calling her princess. At 21, she was rowed through Traitor's Gate into the Tower of London, the same fortress where her mother had been beheaded, fully expecting to die there. At 25, she was Queen of England, and she stayed queen for 44 years. In that time, she took a bankrupt, divided island of about 4 million people, kept it out of a religious civil war that was tearing the continent apart, and destroyed the greatest invasion fleet the world had ever assembled. She did it without an army worth the name, without a husband, and against every assumption of her century about what a woman was for. Elizabeth I is remembered for the Armada speech and the white face paint. What she was actually doing was something much colder and much more interesting. She had learned, as a child, exactly how people get killed, and she built a 44-year reign out of never being pinned down. Her father was Henry VIII, who had broken England from the Church of Rome in order to marry her mother. Her mother was Anne Boleyn, and when Elizabeth was 2 years and 8 months old, Henry had Anne beheaded on charges of adultery, incest, and treason that no serious historian now believes. Elizabeth was declared illegitimate by Act of Parliament and removed from the succession. She was raised in country houses, with a governess who at one point wrote to the court to say the child had no clothes that fit. What she did have was an education normally reserved for a king. Under the humanist scholar Roger Ascham, she learned Latin, Greek, French, and Italian. She was translating serious texts at 11 and could later speak to ambassadors in their own languages without an interpreter. This mattered enormously later. She was never dependent on someone else's summary of what a foreign power had said. Then, at 15, she nearly died for the first time. After Henry died, the teenage Elizabeth was placed in the household of the Dowager Queen and her new husband, Thomas Seymour, a charming, ambitious man who began appearing in the 14-year-old's bedroom in the mornings, in his nightgown. When Seymour was later arrested for plotting to seize the young king, the investigation turned on Elizabeth. Had she agreed to marry him? Was she part of the conspiracy? She was 15 years old, isolated, and interrogated by an experienced royal official whose job was to extract a confession. Her servants were taken and questioned separately. Everyone expected the girl to break. She did not. She admitted nothing, corrected the record only where she could prove it, and wrote to the Lord Protector demanding that the rumors about her be publicly denied. Seymour was executed. Elizabeth survived, and she had learned, at 15, the single most important lesson of her life: what you have never actually said cannot be used to kill you. In 1553, her Catholic half-sister Mary became queen, and Elizabeth, Protestant, young, and the obvious figurehead for every plot against the throne, became the most dangerous person in England to be. When Wyatt's rebellion broke out in 1554, Mary's council wanted Elizabeth's head. She was arrested and taken by barge to the Tower. There is an account of her sitting down in the rain on the stone steps and refusing to go in, saying she was no traitor. She was held for 2 months while investigators searched for a letter, a signature, anything linking her to the rebels. Wyatt was tortured and executed, and on the scaffold, he publicly cleared her. They found nothing because there was nothing to find. She had been careful for years. She was released into house arrest at Woodstock, where she is said to have scratched a line onto a window pane with a diamond, much suspected by me, nothing proved can be. 4 years later, Mary died, and the young woman who had survived by leaving no evidence became queen. She inherited a disaster, a treasury emptied by her predecessors, a lost war with France, a debased currency, and a country that had officially changed religion 4 times in 25 years. Catholic, Protestant, Catholic again, with people burned at the stake each time for believing what had been compulsory a decade earlier. Across the Channel, France was sliding into 30 years of religious civil war that would kill hundreds of thousands. Elizabeth's answer was the religious settlement of 1559, and its genius was deliberate vagueness. The state church was Protestant in doctrine, but kept enough of the old ceremony to be livable for Catholics. Attendance was required, but private belief was not investigated. She is supposed to have said she had no desire to make windows into men's souls, and whether or not the words are hers, the policy was exactly that. Compare the body counts. Her father and sister burned people over doctrine. Elizabeth mostly required outward conformity and asked no further questions, and England did not tear itself apart. Every ruler in Europe assumed that a queen was a temporary condition, that she would marry and her husband would rule. Elizabeth understood the arithmetic better than they did. Marry a foreign prince in England, becomes a junior partner in someone else's empire. Marry an Englishman and she creates a faction and a rival at court. So she did something nobody had done. She turned the marriage negotiation itself into a permanent instrument of foreign policy. For 25 years, she was Europe's most eligible bride and never took the offer. Philip of Spain, her dead sister's husband, proposed early. There were Habsburg archdukes, Swedish kings, and a long, strange courtship with the French Duke of Anjou when she was in her 40s. Each negotiation bought her an ally, or split an enemy coalition, or bought time. She kept her own court guessing too, with Robert Dudley, the one man she seems genuinely to have loved and never married. Told by Parliament to choose a husband, she answered that she was already bound to a husband, the Kingdom of England. The ambiguity could not last forever. Mary, Queen of Scots, Catholic, and with a real claim to Elizabeth's throne, fled to England in 1568 and became a prisoner for 19 years, and the focus of plot after plot. When the Babington conspiracy was exposed in 1586, with Mary's own coded letters approving Elizabeth's assassination, Elizabeth delayed for months, signed the death warrant, and then raged at her council for sending it. Mary was executed in 1587, and Philip of Spain now had his justification. In 1588, he sent the Armada, about 130 ships, to escort an invasion army from the Netherlands. The English had smaller, faster, better-gunned ships and knew the water. They harassed the fleet up the channel, then sent burning ships into the Spanish anchorage at Calais at midnight, which broke the crescent formation and mauled the scattered ships at Gravelines. Then the weather did the rest. The Armada was driven north around Scotland and Ireland and torn apart. And Elizabeth rode to Tilbury in armor to address troops who might yet have had to fight a landing, telling them she knew she had the body of a weak and feeble woman, but the heart and stomach of a king. She reigned another 15 years, years of bad harvests, war in Ireland, and an aging court, but also of Shakespeare, Marlowe, and the first English ships circling the world. In 1601, facing a hostile parliament over monopolies, she gave what became known as the Golden Speech, telling them that though they had and might have, many mightier princes, they never had nor would have any that loved them better. She died in 1603 at 69, and the throne passed peacefully to the son of the woman she had executed. So what did she know? First, what you have not said cannot be used against you. She learned it at 15 under interrogation and ran an entire foreign policy on it. Undecided is a position, and it can be held for 25 years. Second, you do not have to win the argument to end the war. She refused to investigate what people believed, and that single act of deliberate incuriosity spared England the slaughter that consumed France. And third, survival is a skill, not luck. Illegitimate at 2, interrogated at 15, imprisoned at 21, excommunicated, and repeatedly marked for assassination. She outlasted every one of them and gave her name to the age. Next time, a man who spent 4 years on his back painting a ceiling he never wanted to paint, and who carved, at 24, the statue people still queue for. Michelangelo, what he knew.